Almost 2 years ago, I offered up a video entitled, When Atheists Attack. Here is a short clip.
There are certain facts that are starting to come to light. It seems that certain atheists have decided that they are bored with attacking the easy target of creationism. And now it's time to go on the offensive against other atheists. The atheists that don't necessarily agree with the attacking atheist viewpoint.
The story you're about to see is true. The names have not been changed so as not to protect the guilty. I don't know about anyone else, but I am personally getting tired of these arguments that try to set up these no-truth straw men. And I know that I will anger at least one atheist who will feel so, primarily because my counter-arguments will have nothing to do with the dictionary which they were prepared to defend against.
What you're about to see is going to piss people off. Before you start angrily copy-clipping definitions from dictionary websites, don't bother. I've read them already.
That would be leading the witness, I believe. A failed attempt to defer a logically constructed counterpoint to a battle of definition. Well, don't worry, definitions will be presented. Objectively logical ones, not found in dictionaries.
And every bad argument you're about to hear is one that I've personally offered up at one time or another.
An appeal to personal regret or experience does not an argument make. And before we go on, I will be removing your movie examples. Your video editing skills are not the topic of discussion.
Everyone perceives reality according to a complicated framework of beliefs. Some of those beliefs have been justified, and some haven't.
Fallacy of composition plus a justified belief is called a fact. Facts are based in objective reality and comprise knowledge. You can believe a fact, but belief does not show fact. The terms are not synonymous or interdependent. You don't understand the argument as your unmasked man demonstrates.
If you consider something a fact to a level of certainty that you just know it's true, does that mean it's no longer a belief? Of course not.
If you consider something a fact, is the definition of belief. So you just asked, if you believe something a fact, does that mean it's not a belief? Nice equivocation. Try the obverse argument. If you believe a fact, does that mean it is simply a belief?
It still needs to be run through a filter of reason, logic, and evidence before it can actually be considered knowledge.
I would like to ask you, who has made you arbiter of who has done so, or what knowledge is? But that would simply be giving validity to this fallacy.
You've probably heard that there is a default position, a burden of proof free zone.
Yes, it is called not making a positive claim. It's a basic principle of logic.
Actually, there is. It's the complete ignorance of theism.
I'm sorry, the answer was to not have a positive claim. Glenda, please show the man what he could have won. In the trade, we call this shifting the burden of proof, or if you prefer, moving the goalposts. I like both. The one with the positive claim has the burden, and ignorance only works until it is removed, to even the slightest degree.
If you want to raise your children in this default position when it comes to religion, move to a deserted island and never ever bring up religion. When they start asking you why things are the way they are, where everything came from, or what happens after we die, tell them you have no idea.
Mr. Steele, I must disagree. In fact, you can discuss any matter that is demonstrably, objectively true, with no worry of making any untested or untestable claim. This clears you easily of any unobtainable burden of proof. You teeter dangerously on a slippery slope.
Otherwise, your position and your claims are your responsibility.
Unless your position and claims are based on objective truth, something some like to call facts, since all facts are definitively objective truths. Your responsibility as a parent is to share such facts. It's kind of appropriate you use the clip you did here. Let me unmask your man.
Anything that we present as a fact to others is a claim.
Anything we present as a fact to others is a claim, unless it can be demonstrated objectively to be a fact, in which case it is called a fact. Anything we present as a belief is a positive claim.
Yes, most of the time what we state as a fact can be easily justified and gets taken for granted.
Justification is not synonymous with objectively true. Another equivocation. Skepticism is the act of not taking things for granted. You did say you have read the definitions, so I must believe this is your attempt at a false analogy.
But regardless of whether or not someone else expects you to justify a claim, that justification is still your responsibility, even if it's nothing more than why you're convinced or not convinced.
True. Only if you are making a positive claim. A disbelief of such a positive claim carries no such burden. Sorry, but if I said prior to seeing it that I don't believe you would make such an erroneous video, it is not my burden to prove that you did. That rests solely on the claimant, nor do I have to justify the position. If I said, I know you didn't, not only would I be wrong, but it would be my burden to prove otherwise.
Sure, you can deny that you have any burden of proof when you make a claim, no matter how self-evident something seems to you. But if you expect someone else to accept their burden of proof, why not practice what you preach?
Ah, there it is. I was waiting for the religious terminology. A denial of someone else's positive claim is not itself a positive claim. The same as walking down a street is not the same as not walking down a street. Your lack of the positive claim distinction is an equivocation of omission.
What is God?
A positive claim that carries the burden of proof.
If you answer with anything other than, I have no idea, you do have beliefs related to theism and don't lack belief just because you don't believe it's true.
Mr. Steele, I have as yet to find a single creationist sentence that reaches this level of fallacy. First, a disbelief is not equal to a belief. If I disbelieve in the Loch Ness Monster, it is not required that I have an active belief that it does not exist. Skepticism defined. False equivalence exposed. Second, knowledge of a positive claim does not equal belief or counter-belief in that positive claim. Again, skepticism defined. False equivalence rejected.
The lack of belief definition of atheism is usually just shorthand for, I haven't been convinced that God exists in reality outside of the believer's imagination.
It is a straw man and a fallacy of composition to suppose a universal, objective meaning for subjective terms, even if you do so only usually. Lack of belief is sufficient to generally communicate that the belief is not held. Specifics must be determined individually. Your usually is a fine example of a positive claim. Citation needed.
Atheism describes a position.
Or rather, the lack of a position, since atheism requires no positive claim that is not both personal and subjective, i.e., I do not believe a positive claim, and it is in most circumstances simply the refutation of a positive claim that has not been evidenced. You do understand the relationship between the terms position and positive, right?
Although it's extremely easy to explain why you aren't convinced by theism, saying you don't have a position when it comes to theism is simply not true.
Citation needed. Specifically, any atheist claim that atheism is a lack of a position regarding the positive theist claim. Are you about to claim there is such evidence? If you are, let me be the first to expose your poness and demand its presentation.
During a court trial, the prosecution and the defense call witnesses, present items such as phone records or weapons for the judge or jury to consider. But regardless of the verdict, during the trial, all of those things are evidence.
False analogy. This is not a court trial, nor does it have the characteristics of one. Oversimplification. Only one side has a burden of proof in your analogy, the plaintiff. Or, as I like to say, the positive claim. The defense is neither required to present evidence nor refute evidence.
When it comes to extraordinary claims and the supernatural,
Correction, positive claims. Stating I don't believe in the supernatural is neither a claim of any sort nor extraordinary.
many non-believers will state definitively that there is no evidence for it, but that isn't true.
Incorrect. When no unfalsified evidence has been presented, then definitively no evidence has been presented. Unfalsifiable claims, anecdotes, and hearsay do not qualify as evidence in any setting. Secondly, citation needed. Your evidence that unfalsified, not unfalsifiable, evidence has been presented.
Even if it's just a testimonial of someone's personal experience with ghosts, or being abducted by aliens, or being visited by Jesus in a dream, the evidence presented to you doesn't retroactively disappear just because you aren't convinced by it.
Presented in a court of law, your false analogy. A personal testimonial is hearsay and inadmissible as evidence. How much more so when presented against logic?
In closing, the scientific method doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No, it exists within objective reality, which for all intents and purposes does.
Although it is the best tool we have for learning about reality, that doesn't mean we can hide behind it either.
It is not only the best, but also the only such tool that we currently possess. Your statement assumes that some other tool exists. Citation needed.
Irrationality doesn't start with religion. It starts with ignoring or avoiding our mistakes, limitations, and biases.
Yes, and I thank you for your fine example.
And that's why we need science and philosophy.
I'm sorry, which one was your video again? Let's see. Science demands testable evidence, and you advocated for hearsay and anecdote. Philosophy requires basic logic. Shall I list the many fallacies I remain silent on, for brevity's sake? What we really need is fewer atheist apologists, desperately grasping for the non-existent middle ground. That's what we need. I will be removed or interdependent.